I ended up in so many abusive situations and relationships in my adult life because I was conditioned to be comfortable with an abusive God.
Today's conversation is one of my favorite that I've had since starting the podcast in 2020. And that's because this particular guest has crafted some of those beautiful and meaningful music that I've heard as it relates to religious trauma. And that guest is, of course, singer and songwriter Candi Carpenter. Candi grew up within a pastor's home and even traveled with a family gospel band before their career skyrocketed to incredible success, putting them on stage in Nashville with some of the biggest names in country music, like Dolly Parton and a bunch of others that you would definitely recognize. But although Candi experienced incredible success in their music career, they realized that their music did not accurately represent their childhood experiences and the impact that religious trauma and other abusive situations had left on them. That is, until they created the album Demonology. If you grew up in fundamentalism, I have to urge you to go listen to Demonology right now. There are so many tracks that are going to resonate with your experience, whatever it might be. And Candi does a beautiful job merging really unique genres, horror influences, incredible references, and ties it all together to really capture the experiences of people who have grown up in high control religious groups. I know I'm excited for this episode because I'm a huge fan of Candi Carpenter, and I know if you aren't already, you will be by the end of this episode. So I'm going to stop talking and let's get to today's guest. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Candi, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's great to finally meet you.
Yeah, I'm excited. I told a couple people that I was interviewing you, and literally everybody that I've told is like, they're amazing. They're so cool. I've been listening to music on repeat. And I was like, same, because we relate to so much of your lyrics. And I know that my audience is used to hearing a lot of stories about fundamentalism. I don't think we've covered anything in the Christian Missionary Alliance realm. So just give me the 30-second elevator pitch of what your religious denomination was really like.
I have so many confusing memories of growing up as a Christian Missionary Alliance pastor's kid. I remember missionaries coming to stay with us in our home a lot. But I'm honestly not sure how much the Christian Missionary Alliance brand of fundamentalism differs from other brands of fundamentalism. My family was very anti-abortion. I remember going to an abortion protest when I was, I think, 8 or 9 years old. I actually recently found the church program inviting everyone to go to the protest. And it was the first time anyone ever threw a bag of garbage at me. And it's weird that I said it that way. It's weird that there's like more than one example of a bag of garbage being thrown at me, but there is. That's a lot to unpack. Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. But this was the first time. It was McDonald's. And I was just a kid, and I was holding a sign that said, if my parents had aborted me, I wouldn't be here today. So, yeah, I grew up with a lot of anxiety. We were just talking before the interview about scrupulosity. I didn't know I was neurodivergent. I think one of the things that confuses me about my religious experiences, I was so young, just a kid trying to understand what I believed and what I was being told that I believed. Because my mom and dad today have very different beliefs than they had when I was young. Focus on the family was a big part of my childhood. I was like a member of the Focus on the Family Club for kids. I remember telling my dad when I was about 4 years old that when I grew up, I wanted to be a pastor just like him. And he told me that I couldn't be because I was a girl. Of course, I wasn't out as non-binary when I was 4. And I recently found, I actually grabbed this for you today. Have you ever read D is for Dinosaur? Are you familiar?
I have not, but I think we're going to be treated to a reading right now.
You don't want me to read the entire thing, I promise, but this was written by Ken Ham.
Beautiful. I am very familiar with Ken Ham. We had tons of his materials, so maybe I blocked this one out.
Yeah, I did, actually. I just found it in a bin of my stuff, and I've always been really into dinosaurs, and I remember now that this was the catalyst to my dinosaur obsession. So my parents now do not believe there were dinosaurs on the ark, but this book reminds me very clearly that when I was a kid, they did believe there were dinosaurs on the ark and that the earth wasn't really very old. And that the creation story was a literal story and not a parable. So yeah, they've changed a lot. I think I've had something to do with that, with influencing them in that direction.
What you're sharing and what I've seen and heard from other interviews, like there are so many similarities, like even the influences, like the Ken Ham influence, like, and I'm sure 90% of my audience went, "Oh my God, D is for dinosaur." I remember reading that as a kid. And I mean, it is weird what we remember and don't remember from our childhoods, and what was traumatic for some of us and what wasn't for others, and what stuck with some and not with others. And I really was curious, like kind of starting the interview off. You were diagnosed with autism in 2022. And I know a lot of my audience is neurodivergent, and getting that diagnosis and understanding how your brain operates and then looking back at how you perceive things as a child, it's like a key that unlocks a lot of things. How do you perceive your childhood now, knowing what you know? Like, how did it affect you when you're seeing things very differently than the other people in your family and maybe your faith community?
When I first realized that I might be autistic, it was right after I was diagnosed with ADHD. That's pretty common for neurodivergent folks to, find one answer and then all the connected comorbidities. And ADHD opened that door for me. I just remember looking at this graph, all of the different ways that you could be neurodivergent, and going, "Oh no, like I think I'm quite a few of these actually." And ADHD didn't answer all of the questions. So I started learning more about autism, realizing that was me, learning more about OCD and realizing that was me. And I shared with you earlier, I kind of stopped doing interviews for a while because I would sometimes lose my ability to speak mid-interview. It actually happened to me during an interview for Forbes. It was pretty devastating. I was really nervous about that conversation. It was my first big interview with a major outlet like Forbes. I was talking about recording a song remotely using some new technology for the first time. And I wanted to sound like I really knew what I was talking about. And I just stopped talking mid sentence and we had to end the interview early. So making these accommodations for myself now has been really important to feeling like I can open up about my journey. So thank you so much for making this safe space for me today to talk. My mom and dad, I'm assuming, and I want to be so careful because I never want to diagnose anyone else, and they're not on the same journey that I am, seeking answers for themselves at this time. But I believe there has to be some hereditary neurodivergence that I inherited from them. I think it had something to do with my dad's kind of obsession with specifically Noah's Ark and kind of our family's literal interpretation of the Bible and of the rules, so to speak. I took everything very literally. And I don't think that was just my interpretation. I think everything was presented to me literally. Hell is a literal place. There's literally going to be a rapture, and there's literally a chance that you will be left behind in it. And I grew up kind of trying to reason with God. Like Sunday, I'd go to church, and then like all through the week, I would pray and say, "Dear Lord Jesus, I had such a great time at church on Sunday. Please don't come back until next Sunday because I want to make sure that I have just one more Sunday to worship you with my friends and family. So please don't come back." And then that Sunday, I would say, "Lord Jesus, church was so great today. Please don't come back for another week until next Sunday." I think that I became obsessed with this fear of rapture. Most of my dreams were rapture dreams, left behind dreams, the great white judgment hall, all of my sins being projected up on this big movie screen behind me. That's kind of what I thought Judgment Day would look like. And when your father is your pastor, you really don't feel safe talking to him about those concerns. My dad really thought that the world would end at any moment. He was buying up gold coins in case the economy collapsed. I grew up believing I was possessed by demons because our family band would open for other pastors sometimes in rural Ohio, and there was a self-proclaimed exorcist preaching a sermon about how he claimed that all mental illness, quote unquote, was caused by demonic possession. And I'm sitting there not knowing what is going on with my particular brain, but knowing that it's not the same as the kids I know at school, and it's not the same as a lot of the people around me, and going, oh, that's got to be demons then. And I didn't want to tell my, very religious family that I thought I might be possessed. So I started researching how to perform exorcisms on myself at home. I knew I needed some kind of holy oil, and we didn't have any olive oil. So I blessed my mom's canola oil, and I ended up with pretty serious acne breakouts from rubbing that all over myself and just like begging God to take the demon out of me. I guess the demon was just autism.
Yeah, right.
Or OCD and ADHD and other things.
And I relate to so much of that, and the feeling of, I mean, literally every Sunday you're feeling this terror that, like, did I accept Christ in my heart the right way? Did I cry? I've been talking about this a lot lately with different friends, but it's like, if you cried not enough, you'd feel like you weren't emotional enough. And if you cried too much, you felt like, was I putting on a show to try to convince God? Like, you just overthink and lay in bed at night freaked out. And same thing, fear of the rapture, the fear of persecution. We'd always hear the stories of people being put to death for their faith. And, would you be willing to do that? And I remember having nightmares about my pastor being killed in front of the congregation. Like, that stuff was so imprinted on us, and it was taught to us as literal. Like, from the time before you can read, it's like there's a heaven, a hell, there is like all of these things that you need to know about. And it's really scary, I think, as a kid, and especially when you are taking things extremely literally, you are focusing on certain topics more than others. Like, that's got to be a terrifying way to grow up. How long of a process do you feel like you were in the faith before you started like really doubting like the reality of some of these claims? Like, when did you start seeing holes in the system, that other people didn't seem to be seeing or pointing out?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think a lot of folks have had the same experience where it finally occurs to you who created God. I think everyone I know who has eventually left the faith that I've talked to so far kind of started with that question. Well, okay, how? And it all falls apart really quickly, this house of cards. I remember, and the marketing is brilliant. Like, the way that it's structured to where if you question God, it's a great sin. So like, you can't, you train yourself to think that naivety and just simply not researching things is virtuous and like a really good quality, and just blindly trusting. And the problem with that is it carries over into other things too. It carries over into relationships. You'll be more trusting with unsafe people. You'll think that you're supernaturally protected. I ended up in so many abusive situations and relationships in my adult life because I was conditioned to be comfortable with an abusive God. And it just colors everything. So I found that I was kind of stepping away into less and less legalistic forms of Christianity on my way out. I remember in high school, I had these little parachute men, these little plastic army guys up over my bed. And every night I would pray and say, God, I'm not trying to test you. I just want to have faith. And you say that if I have faith the size of a mustard seed, I can move a mountain. So please just knock one of these parachute men off the ceiling onto the bed. And that's something that could have happened on its own. I mean, they were just up there with thumbtacks, and those parachute men did not fall. Night after night, I woke up, parachute men were still on the ceiling, and things were so volatile at home. If my suspicions are right that my family have been like living their whole lives with the same type of neurodivergence that I have been, of course we didn't know how to talk to each other. It's very hard to have empathy and compassion with other people when you can't have it with yourself. And when you don't know what's going on in your brain and you just feel broken, you know, it's hard to love in the way that you want to be loved, in the way that you want to love other people. And when you believe that's just your sin nature and that you were created inherently evil and inherently bad, maybe you don't go to therapy and get the help you need. So, weirdly enough, and I don't really know to this day how to explain it other than that my mom and dad were really creative people who loved music. We had this family band, Heaven Sent. It's a cassette cover. Changed the name to the Carpenters with an apostrophe S when I joined because we belong to Jesus. That was the joke. Growing up in that band, I fell in love with singing. And we were coming to Nashville. I was working with a producer. And I was singing in bars.
And that was
Nashville
from early as like
bars.
11, right? Like it was super young. Yeah.
Yeah, my family didn't believe in drinking or going to bars. I don't know why I was singing in bars. My family was going with me. I'm not like, they wouldn't drink, they'd sit there with Coca-Cola, but it's just all so weird to me and I can't explain it. My therapist has told me to stop trying. There's this cognitive dissonance where they didn't want me to be in the world and of the world, or they wanted me to be in the world, but not of the world. But they were like,
you can be a light in
witness.
these dark places. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I think they thought that I would be a spiritual witness in secular music. I think that's what they hoped. And
that's worked out really well. The plan is all coming together.
Yeah. Well, I guess I am a spiritual witness, just kind of
a little different than expected and roadmapped.
Yeah. I think that my mom and really trusting, as we kind of talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So they didn't ask the right questions. And I ended up with a manager as a young kid who was a really dangerous person. And I ended up living with her and dropping out of school at 15, which was such a relief to me because I was drowning at school. Socially, academically, I was way too neurodivergent to thrive in a public school environment without a diagnosis and without being able to get the kind of help and guidance I needed. So between kind of this volatile familial relationship and my uncertain mental health and just kind of falling apart at school, I was really relieved to have the option to leave.
Yeah, it seems like a safety net almost.
Yeah.
And turns out not to be.
No.
It's really interesting, like hearing your story. And I know right now you're doing this series called My Exorcism on TikTok, and I've been watching it. I rewatched through it before doing this interview to kind of like keep mapping out kind of the path of your life. And it's really interesting because you had like this kind of meteoric success super young, like where you're I was watching you sing at Dolly Parton's like 50th anniversary celebration at the Grand Ole Opry, and which is an amazing performance, by the way, and seeing you collaborate with all these huge names that people would kill to work with. And then, in the back of that, you've got also these very abusive relationships and people taking advantage in ways that is really harmful. Like, do you feel like you got to really enjoy the success as it was happening? Or was it always this thing of, is it worth it when I'm dealing with all these abusive, really power-hungry people in the background?
That's such a great question. And I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. I wish I could say that I was enjoying it. I think I was just trying to survive. I think that the entirety of my career until just recently, I thought, well, I've just got to get through this to get to the point where I can do what I want to do.
Yeah.
When COVID happened and everything stopped, and I had a moment to sit in silence and consider whether or not I was happy. I realized I had never been super happy on my journey. And then I thought, well, what's the point then? Life is for living, and it's not for living for other people. So just having that time to reflect, like, I'm not sure I would have realized I was autistic and found the help that I needed to thrive without that break. I'm proud of the work that I did um, in country music, but my mom and dad chose country for me as a genre when I was a kid because they thought it was the most wholesome genre, aside from Christian music. They thought it was kind of the family genre. Leanne Rimes was really popular when I was a kid. I wanted to be just like her, so I started learning how to yodel, and brought me to Nashville. And I think they thought Nashville was a safer place than LA or New York. Um, that wasn't my experience, unfortunately. It was incredibly dangerous. Um, I didn't find the right people. I didn't meet the right people. And I kind of just jumped from one abusive situation to the next until I really had this moment of reflection. And I started writing Demonology basically at a point where I was about to quit music altogether.
Wow.
I didn't feel like I could share my actual truth or my stories within the, I don't want to say confines of country radio, but I I didn't feel like I could really express my stories and talk about my truth within the genre at the time. And I just started writing from the heart. That's such a cliche thing to say, but it's true. I started writing songs that I didn't want to release. My parents didn't know I was non-binary. My parents didn't know I'd left the church. I mean, they found out about that. I know they've heard the album. They said they were never going to listen to it, but I know they heard the album because Strawberry Starburst came on in the car when I was with my mom the other day, and AirPlay from her phone. So like, I know she's listened.
Whoops.
I know she's listened, and
Yeah.
I think it's funny it's that song, but gosh, like I wish that I had the relationship with my parents where I could have just told them about everything I was thinking and feeling without that fear of being being judged and shamed for
Yeah.
myself. Because it's gosh, I've talked to so many other folks who have lived through religious trauma, which has been really healing in the process of putting out this album, getting to meet so many wonderful human beings with similar stories and experiences, and realize that we weren't alone.
Yeah.
I really love my mom and dad, and I can understand that they aren't coming from a place of real, true judgment or disdain for me. It's that they're scared. They genuinely believe that hell is a real place that I could go to. And they're afraid because they love me. And I wish I could just kind of bring them along on my journey and show them that they don't need to be afraid. It breaks my heart that they're so scared.
Yeah.
And I wish that, when I see that fear, it just reminds me of how much fear I had growing up. And I inherited that fear from them. And it's all about breaking those cycles now. But breaking those cycles is scary because, gosh, after years of that judgment, after years of that rhetoric, after years of, God will punish you twice as much if you leave the faith after knowing the truth. It's like, it takes years for the fear of hell to leave. And I'm not afraid of hell anymore. I'm not afraid of this stuff now. I mean, nothing desensitizes you to that, like any of the comment sections under my videos of my religious trauma. So
Yeah. It's
every day. ping, ping, ping on my phone. Somebody's saying something absolutely bizarre to me, and it doesn't faze me now.
Yeah, it's like, thanks for boosting my video in the YouTube algorithm. I appreciate it. That's how I interpret it. Yeah.
They really are just helping more people find the message, aren't they?
Yeah, right. I man, and I resonate again with and again, the music I think that put you on my radar was the Everybody Goes to Hell, which I know you probably hear that every time you talk to somebody who's deconstructed or has come from a religious trauma background. Like, it's such a emotional song. It's something that's been on loop for me probably every day. I've listened to it at least once for the last, like, since I first heard it. And it's a really powerful song. And well, let me say this first. One of the things that stood out to me with what you just said is understanding your parents are coming from a place of love is a confusing feeling. And knowing, and there are people in the religious background that are not. Like, some people love the power that religion gives them. But I think of, like, the times that people I love who were like family or my family themselves doing really hurtful things in the name of love in religion, and the times that I myself did hurtful things in the name of religion. And the reason I mentioned Everybody Goes to Hell is I recently reconnected with a non-binary cousin that I have, much older than me, was in and out when I was a kid. And I just remember trying to convert them all the time and trying to be a good witness when they would come over and visit the family. And ultimately got to a point where the family kind of separated and I hadn't seen them in years, and just reconnected a couple months ago. And we reconnected in a major way and have I think the start of a really good relationship again. But I sent them your song, Everybody Goes to Hell. And, one of the things that they mentioned was, when you say, I'm sorry, Mom, and I'm sorry, Dad, when you make that apology, like when you say, like, I'm sorry, is that coming from a place of, I'm sorry that I know you truly want this for me, you think this is best for me, and I don't see it that way? Or is it something where it's this, I'm sorry, this is how it is? Like what does that I'm sorry mean to you? And if your parents hear that, which it sounds like they have, like, what do you hope they hear in that apology, in that song?
These are such great questions. Thank you. I think
I'm glad that one made sense, because I got nervous midway through, like, I'm just rambling here. Let's edit this one down.
I think it's a loaded I'm sorry, because I'm not sorry.
Right.
I'm not sorry I'm a pagan. I'm not sorry that I learned about science and that I'm
sorry,
being
Ken
myself.
Ham.
Yeah, I'm not. I think I'm sorry that they're not over here with me. I think I'm sorry for myself, it's cognitive dissonance is a crazy thing, and more than one thing can be true at once. I can love my parents and also know that it's not okay the way I grew up. It's not okay. It's not okay that I was on my own from the time I was 15. Looking at it again through the lens of neurodivergence and their own scrupulosity, it seems. I can have empathy for them and why maybe they didn't know what to do. They came from a similar background. I remember my dad telling me a story that, he almost died when he was born, and his grandfather went outside and prayed and basically told God, like, if you save my grandson, he'll live his life in service to you. One of those situations.
Yeah, right.
And so my dad grew up hearing his whole life that he was destined to be a pastor because God spared him for that purpose. I mean, that's a lot for a little boy to shoulder. And then his own father, who was also a pastor, passed away when he was 15. And I think he doubled down on having a heavenly father, on his faith.
Yeah.
I wish I could just go back in time and give him a big hug and tell him that he was enough. And that what he was hearing at church about not being enough, about being inherently wicked, was bullshit and that he was a wonderful kid. That's all any child wants to hear.
Yeah.
That's why I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry for my part and what I, and the good decisions I'm making now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how I heard the song was
Right.
it's and that's why I told them, because they said the last thing I want, and they're later 40s, and and just mentioned like they're seeing this next generation, like me, you, with the song, like they're seeing us go through this process and this struggle. And they were saying the last thing we want you to do is feel sorry. And I said, I think it falls into the many things are true category. It's like there's times, especially now as a parent myself, like you have this idea of what the future looks like. And I think in religion, that is coupled with this possessiveness of like, this is this gift from God I'm responsible for. And that's so much pressure on a parent, but it's also so much pressure on the child. Like it's this cycle of this confirmation bias. So like if something bad happens, it's because you're straying away from their purpose. If something good happens, it's God telling you which way to go. Like there's all these layers there beyond just like, oh, my parents were really mean and controlling of me. It's like they have their own issues that need to be worked through on the spiritual side that really affect them. And I think part of the stage of working through it is understanding like they feel really let down in a way that's like outside of anybody's control. Like it's just an expectation that they were taught to have. And I really appreciate like talking through that lyric, because I was like, I know what I think and how I hear it as a listener, but I was curious the intent writing.
It was a very difficult song to write.
Yeah.
It was, this whole process has been interesting because I have repressed so much. And talking about it fearlessly is relatively new for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in my 30s, and
I thought you were 6,666 years old.
I am. Well, actually, I'm 6,665 years old. I'm celebrating my 6,666th birthday in November, which is a really big year. I'm very excited for that birthday. I decided I might throw a birthday party show. I think that would be fun.
I feel like you need to tie something into it. That would be really cool.
I digress.
Anybody who's never heard you say that before is like, what? But I'm glad we know what's going on.
I'm just being weird. I wasn't allowed to be weird for years and years and years of my career. I was so afraid of being found out as weird that I seemed weirder.
Yeah, right. It always defeats itself.
Yeah, well, I don't even recognize myself when I see old interviews and old performances. I'm genuinely like, who is that? Who is that? What is going on? It's like way too many facial expressions. It would be like
yeah, I should look this way right now.
Normal. Yeah. Yeah. I tried it, and it's exhausting. So I'm not doing that anymore.
I'm curious, like finding your identity now in a very real way, because it does sound like so much of your life was this like survival mode where it's like I'm the only thing I can transact with is like I can be this to get me into this opportunity to appease whoever was the God figure in the life at the time, whether that's a manager, whether that's a husband, whether that's whoever that was, even parental expectations. Like finding your identity now, is it just a lot of like play and experimentation, or is there like been some process for you coming out of it to like really explore in a kind of strategic way?
A great question too. I've been going to a lot of therapy for a lot of years. Therapy. That's a big part of it. And just trying to talk it out, trying to uncover these buried memories and figure out what brings me joy, what it makes me feel inspired. I just adopted a kitten. She's the cutest thing in the world. I'm trying to do more things that are delightful. And I think that having this relationship with my fans feels so personal is the best part of all of this. Like
Hmm.
this community that's been building, this safe space. I know I can show up as I am. If I'm having a bad day, I don't have to try to pretend that I'm having a good day. Nobody wants me to do that. You know, we're
Yeah.
trying to cultivate an authentic relationship, an authentic group of people. So it's I know that if I needed to go on stage without brushing my hair and taking a shower, I could. Like
Yeah.
I know that everyone is so accepting in this incredible group of people. I'm really lucky to be a part of. And there's a Discord community. The Candyland Discord community is just so important to me. Really gets me through the day a lot. There are a lot of ex-evangelical and neurodivergent folks in there
Yeah.
talking and sharing stories, and it is such a beautiful group. Um, I think I wandered away from your original question.
And no, I was curious like what the exploration process looks like. Cause like I was talking to someone just recently who grew up homeschooled and like I was like, how did you catch up on movies? I feel like that's a big thing for me is like I feel like I miss so much pop culture. Like for you, is it just literally like I'm gonna try a little bit of everything, try every music genre, watch everything, like how do you kind of chip away at like the stone to see like who's inside? Like who am I actually? Because I've been dictated to be this for so long.
It is a lot of trial and error and experimentation. Like I don't really know ever what to wear, which is strange. Like I don't know how to do that. I don't really know how to put an outfit together in a cohesive way. Like I'll end up wearing something so loud, and I accidentally wore overalls. I thought it was a brain pattern to a show, and my fans were like, "Hey, those look like intestines," which is very cool. But like
That's very cool.
accidentally wore intestine overalls. Like I just missed stuff. Um, I know a lot about Southern gospel music. If you want to hear about Karen Peck and New River, I mean, I can talk about that. But yeah, like I didn't know a lot of cool modern music as a kid. And
Right.
um I would watch horror movies in secret at friends' houses. I always loved horror, but like it's pretty wild to be able to do the things I enjoy out in the open without having to hide them. I think that
Right.
I still have an instinct to hide. Um,
Hmm.
a few days ago, I experienced a full verbal shutdown where I wasn't able to talk for a couple of days. I could type, I could write things out, but I couldn't speak. Um, and that just happens sometimes in the way that I experience autism. And I needed to post something, I thought, because I didn't want the algorithm to give up on me.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was like hours of self-loathing where I'm like, "How God, like, why does this happen?"
Hmm.
And I realized, "Wait, why am I hiding this
Yeah.
part of my neurodivergent experience? Like, it's okay for people to know that this is normal and that this happens." So learning to stop masking, literally unmasking, is, I think, my biggest challenge on that journey right now.
I think especially given the community that's grown around you that is evangelical, for lack of a better phrase, at the moment, it's like they can smell the facade a mile away. So I think it serves like to come as yourself and to be like, hey, this is me. Like that I think is the reason why so many have flocked to you. And I know like for me, listening to your music, it's like hearing your internal monologue publicly, which has got to be scary as an artist, but it's also really neat and relatable. I want to ask this because this is something that I know I struggled with so much, especially in the beginning of leaving, is like there's one thing to be like, oh, I'm public and I'm myself and I'm doing this. But then sometimes I would catch myself doing something to like stick a middle finger up to like the group I grew up in or certain people in my life. And I realized like, oh, they're still controlling me. Like I'm still kind of under their thumb. How do you ever like catch yourself doing that or balance it? Or do you think it's good to lean into that sometimes and be like, yeah, like screw that. That was horrible. Like, let me publicly say this for your benefit.
Whatever we need to do to to get through it. I mean, I feel like if I had that, all of the energy that I put into deconstructing, I could have done I would have made 20 albums by now. I mean, I feel like the biggest project of my whole life has been just deconstructing and leaving the church and no longer being religious. I was still religious when I met my partner. I was still like, so this might be too much information, but I am autistic, so I'm going to tell you anyway. Like when we were first dating and we would be having sex, I would be praying for forgiveness actively the entire time. Like
That's a mood killer.
But then it like becomes something you're almost into. So then when you like realize that you're not gonna go to hell for having sex, and then it's like, oh, I can just enjoy this. How do you do that? Like you almost like inadvertently fetishize sinning. And then it's like then you have to re-examine how to have a normal, healthy relationship around that.
Where's the equilibrium here?
I don't know. I mean, so much shame around my body, so much shame around gender stuff. Like when I first met my partner, I was telling him all the time, like, I don't feel like a girl. I don't like being called a girl. I don't like being called young lady or woman, or that's just weird to me. And I don't really know what to do about that. As is the case with most of the stuff, like I just didn't have the language to describe my experience. So when I found out that I didn't have to be one or the other thing and that I could just be myself, blew my mind. But when we got together, I would make him go to church with me. Like on occasion, because I'm still convinced that the Holy Spirit would move inside of him and like change his mind, even though I can honestly say I never had that experience.
Right.
I just somehow thought this would happen. So we went to Cross Point and he said, I'll only go if I can wear my sunglasses inside. Which is hilarious looking back. Like he was sitting there with his arms crossed, his sunglasses on, just kind of like looking around like.
Right.
And of course he did that. And I'm standing up, like really trying to be full of the Spirit. And I'm singing about being fully covered in blood and just pour your blood, just blood all over me.
Which is on brand for you.
It is.
So.
You're right. But like, I'm like, killing the lamb. And it's just like, I think I looked down at him with his sunglasses on and I'm singing this crazy stuff going, I'm in a cult. It's just a really, really big cult. Oh no, I'm still in a cult. And I just left a different cult. I mean, once you're taught that magical thinking is, like that, a snake talked to a lady and made the lady eat an apple. And that's why people have periods. Like once you believe that, you'll believe anything.
Right.
But that was the beginning. That was the beginning of the end. So sometimes if I want to make a sarcastic comment, I think we all have the prerogative to just try to laugh about it. Because what else are we going to do?
Yeah. Cry. It's like, sometimes I feel like it's like laughing or crying. I'll laugh about it, and we'll rock with that for a little bit.
Eric, do you feel like your sense of humor is just like so messed up now?
Oh my God. Yes, I feel even doing this show sometimes I feel like I've been far more unbuttoned lately on this podcast, but like especially in the beginning because I cover so much like serious topics like clergy sexual abuse and like all this. Like I try to be respectful of what I'm talking about, and I know my audience. Like I have some that are still Christians, I have a lot that are not, and so I try to balance it. But I've gotten to a point now where I'm like, they're gonna find out who I am, so like I'm just gonna talk. But sometimes I have jokes come into my mind, and I'm like, whoa, I don't know if this one's going to fly. Like maybe this one stays on the Patreon, or something like that. But it's, the sense of humor in the group chats I'm in is off the chains. Like religious trauma survivors are hilarious. So.
Oh my gosh. It's like the algorithm knows too. Like the videos that I'm seeing on Instagram specifically are just getting so wild that I'm not even
like
sure
Christian Nightmares shows up every second you're scrolling and
it's like beyond that into like now it's showing me ironic. You know what? I'll send you some examples sometime. You'll be like, what is going on? Is Candi Carpenter okay? Like,
Please do. Anytime you see an insane Christian clip, I'm more than happy to receive it. I have so many people that send me just stacks of reels from like weird services, and I'm like, yes, let's do it.
I've been seeing a pastor from a church that I used to go to popping up on Christian Nightmares lately.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Kent Christmas.
That's a great name for a pastor.
Yeah, I've been seeing that lately, and I've been like, oh, I went there briefly.
Yeah.
I had a pastor tell me I was married to someone who I met when I was 15, and he was 36. I met him backstage at the Grand Ole Opry, and I had a lot of guilt and shame about leaving that relationship for a long time, but I don't now, because all I need to know is that I met him when I was 15 and he was 36 and he was married to his third wife. And I didn't know that detail. And he was taking me to this church, and I went to one of the pastors there and I said, I'm in a really bad situation. And they told me that he wasn't abusive enough for me to leave him, and that if I did, I would go to hell. And that was really the beginning. That was really the beginning of the end of my faith.
Yeah.
Because I decided I'd rather go to hell than be married to that man another day.
Right. Well, if that's not hell, like what is? Like, it's such a horrible environment. I know we're getting close to the end of our time. I'm curious for you, as someone who's going through this process still and are now in this period of like transformation and like growth and getting to really for the first time explore what you like and not be rooted in what everybody else wants for you. What's next down the path? Do you feel like there's more in this vein that you're gonna be working on? Do you feel like you're gonna take a radically like different direction? Like what do you see happening in the next couple years for yourself? If you can see that coming, or if it's a complete unknown, we can skip the question, but I'm curious.
Well, I have a new single coming out that's a duet with my best friend Kaylee Shore. We recorded a cover of All the Things She Said as a celebration of both of our queer experiences. And I want to work on a new album. I'm so proud of Demonology. Demonology will always be just like, I think, my most important body of work. I learned how to be honest writing Demonology. I think it taught me who I really am. And it gave me courage to talk about things that I was afraid to discuss before this album was out in the world. I mean, I was sick to my stomach when we released Demonology. I was like, oh no, these songs are in the world and people are going to hear me say some of these things. And it can be a lot to have to make eye contact with people at shows and sing some of those verses. But
right.
I've been writing for a new album. I still have a lot more to say. I mean, I'll always just be writing about my life. I think as I figure out more of my trauma and work through it, that'll be coming out in the music. I seem to have trouble staying off the topic of deconstruction and being an ex-evangelical. I keep bringing it back up, but I'm also exploring themes of love, of my queerness, of my gender identity, and just, like, I don't know. I write from a place of pain very often. That's kind of why I write. I write to process pain. I'd love to get to a point where I'm writing some happy, jubilant, like celebratory anthems, but I don't know if that's me. Because it's not really what I listen to. So I don't know. Like, I think I'm just learning how to be okay not being for everybody, which is a hard pill to swallow. When I grew up a showbiz kid and talent competitions, literally just trying to win talent competitions by being something for everyone.
Right.
I don't think you can be something for everybody and be really happy. At least that's my opinion. So I'm just going to try to be somebody for me, and then make friends and fans along the way who vibe with my vibe.
Well, I know I vibe in a big way with your music. I know I know a lot of my audiences as well. Count me as a fan. Hopefully after this interview, count me as a friend, but I'll settle for fan in the meantime. I really appreciate you doing this. I know you're extremely busy, and I know you're working on some incredible things. So thank you for taking the time to do this. I hope it's not the last time that we chat.
Well, I've got a treat for you before I go.
Okay.
I have this just on my Patreon right now, but if you would like to hear the verse and the chorus of the first song I ever recorded with my family's band called I'm Glad You're My Daddy, with the complete recitation from my dad. This isn't available anywhere else except for my Patreon. Do you want to hear this?
I really do want to hear this.
Okay.
There was once a little orphanage on the edge of town. It was known as Hope House. The couple who ran this wonderful home loved Jesus their Lord very much and wanted all of the children of Hope House to know him too. One special day, an evangelist came to chapel. He too was an orphan and understood the loneliness that often filled the hearts of the children who sat so quietly in the pews. He spoke of God's great love, so great that his Son had left the glorious halls of the heavenly mansion to seek and to save lost children. With the smiling face and shining eyes of one who knows, the preacher spoke of the offer of adoption into God's eternal family, which Jesus was waiting to give each of them. And then, gently, lovingly, he invited each and every child of Hope House to accept God as their heavenly Father, Jesus as their brother, and the Spirit as their friend and counselor. 3 young ladies had been listening intently. They sat on the edge of their seats, hearts beating fast. And when the evangelist asked those who wanted to accept Jesus' offer of eternal life to just raise their hands, 3 little hands shot up, and 3 young souls were added to the Father's eternal family. Later, each child took out her best stationery and, heart overflowing with gratitude, wrote love letters to her new family. And they went like this.
Dear God, glad you're my daddy. It's been a long time since I had one. Now I've got someone to hold me when I'm scared. Help me cross the highway, come and watch when I play softball, and teach me how to live so I'll grow up and make you proud. Dear Jesus,
I wanted to share that with you because I feel like that song describes the Christian Missionary Alliance, my childhood experience, everything we talked about, like in a perfect little microcosm, and just sums it all up. That's the reason I started in music. It was my first recording session.
I gotta say, your dad's narration voice gives the Evil Dead tape where it's like Kandar, and the camera is just whizzing through the forest, you know. But man, that's a lot.
It's a lot. I hadn't heard that for years, and I found the cassette tape for the series I've been putting on social media.
Yeah,
and played it I was with my in-laws in Florida and played it, and I realized I was playing it outside at full volume, so like their neighbors
they're just like, what the hell's going on over there?
What Bill and Wild are doing over